Hello, my name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this particular video, we're going to be looking at using Bokeh again for data visualization, but we're going to be focusing on how to manipulate the glyphs or the data points on the actual visualization. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn. All right, so I'm inside um, Jupyter Notebooks, and we're just going to go ahead and set up our libraries that we're going to need for this particular video. So we're just going to do that first. So I'll put the libraries right here. Got a line that I don't need. So we're going to be using PyDataset to actually pull our data. We're going to be using a data set called Duncan. More about that in a few moments. Then we just have some basic libraries related to Bokeh. Bokeh.plotting, we're going to use the figure. This is for setting up our actual axes, our X and Y axes, and labeling them. And then we're going to use Bokeh.io. This is like input output. And so the output file is for saving the actual file. And then the show function is going to be used to actually display it. And then just pandas down here in case we have to do some data preparation. Nothing too serious. Now our next trick here is going to be data preparation. It's going to be very, very simple. So all we're doing here is we're loading a data set called Duncan using the data function that's from up here, right here. And we're going to just take a look at the first few rows of it using the .head method. So let me go ahead and run my libraries, and then let me go ahead and do the data preparation. So you can see our data set called Duncan. It has 4 variables basically, or I guess you could say 5. The first column is telling us the type of occupation. Then the second one is the type. It could be a professional job type, white collar or blue collar. And then we have income, education, and prestige that are all measured on a scale of 0 to 100 in terms of like how much money it is, as an example, or the level of education or the prestige. So that's what that is about. Now, before we can appreciate how we're able to modify the glyphs here, we got to see what things look like in the default settings when you don't make any changes to what Bokeh will do. So let me show you that first. So we're going to make a scatter plot. Here's the scatter plot. And so in the first line, we're making an object called fig. We're using the figure function. We're going to label our x-axis. That's going to be prestige. We're going to label our y-axis. That's going to be education. And we're setting a title called prestige versus education. So that's going to display our x-y axes. We're making a scatter plot, obviously. Now we're going to take that object fig and we're going to add the circle method to it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to tell it, hey, I want you to take the prestige column and the education column for my X and Y axes, and that's going to come from my source called df. df is what we created up here in this second cell right here. Then we're going to have the output file. This is just so you can save it somewhere on your computer. As you can see there, it's not named appropriately. I guess I should change that, but I'm not too worried about it. Prestige versus INC. I guess I could change it to education so there's no confusion. And then we're going to show it with this figure down here, this function down here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right, nice and beautiful. You can see that. Let me make it a little bit bigger for you. And so this is the default plot. Without making any changes, without making any modifications, this is what it will look like. So you can see we have a general positive correlation here. As prestige goes up, the level of education a particular job type has also goes up. No surprises there. Now let's go ahead and see what we can learn in terms of making modifications to the glyphs. And when I use the term glyph, I'm talking about these little data points on the actual axis. They're called glyphs. That's just what they call them using Bokeh language. Not sure why, but that's how it works. Now, let's go ahead and I'm going to show you first how we can change the color and do other things to manipulate this. So let me go ahead and pull up my code here. So first one is changing the color. All right, so this is mostly the same. And at the end of the video, I'll show you a shortcut about making updates where you don't have to copy and paste code over and over again. So you can see right here, let me just change this to education. This first line is exactly the same. The second line is a little bit different. So now we still are using the circle method. All this is the same right here, but now we've updated a few things. Now we've actually changed the size, the color, and the transparency. So the size is now equal to 16, which is much bigger. I think that's pixels. The fill color is now yellow, so the inside of the circles will now be yellow. And the fill underscore alpha, that's kind of like a measure of the transparency, is going to be 0.2. So now we're going to see what this looks like. And so there you go. You can see this is our new plot. You can see the inside of the circles are yellow. They're much bigger. We still have the blue outline on them because we did not change that. And it's not a dark yellow. It's kind of got a little bit of a transparency to it. And so just to compare this to the original, here's the exact same plot with the default features. And here is the new plot with the modifications. So again, when you do this really depends on what you're trying to do, who is your audience, etc. Let's move on to now multiple glyphs. So now we're going to have two different sets of glyphs on here and that are going to be determined by how we subset the data. We're going to subset using a categorical variable. All right, so here's what's going on. Let me give you a little bit of space so you don't get cramped here. So to spread this out a little bit, make it easier to read. Okay, first, we're subsetting our data by type. So we're making one object called source underscore WC, and we're subsetting by the type WC, which stands for white collar. That'll be its own separate data set. And then we repeat this process, this time for professional job types, PROF. So source underscore PROF. Now, just for fun, we're throwing in a tooltip. So when we overlay the actual data points, what we're going to see here is when we overlay on education, it's going to pull the education data, and when we overlay on the scatter plot on a data point, it's going to show us the education data, and it's going to show us the prestige data. That's what it's going to show us. This is just a label for it, or this is the data, I believe, and no, this is the data right here, and this is the label that we're giving it. This will make sense in a second. Then we set up our figure. All this is the same. And then what's new here is this stuff right here for the tooltips, which is going to be taken from this object up here at the top right here. And then right here we have our two different glyphs. So we use the dot circle method both times. All this is the same. Notice how our sources are different. So for the first one, the source is source underscore WC. For the second one, the source is source underscore PROF. We label them appropriately. This is white collar, thus WC. This is PROF. This is for the legend, by the way. I believe that's new. And then we have our different fields here. So the field for the white collars is blue, which is kind of ironic. And the field for the glyphs is green. And then we have different transparencies. And so now we name it update.html. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, so here it is. And so you can see here that the white collars are the blue dots. They're really hard to see because the dots are small. And then the professionals are the green dots. And so if you see, if we hover over a data point, it gives us the score for education and prestige, the X and Y axes on this scatter plot. And you can clearly see that right here and right here and right here. And so that is just an extra little thing we threw in for fun here. Now, for our final one, I'm going to show you how to update. So that last graph wasn't quite as easy to see as we would hope. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to update it, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So Again, let me give it a little bit of space here for you. All right. So remember the name of this object up here, WC Glyphs. I'm taking this object and I'm using it down here. And what I'm doing is I'm using this method called glyph.size, and I'm changing the size to 20. So now the WC glyphs are going to be much bigger. And I repeat this with the prof glyphs. That is this object right here. So instead of typing all this out again, I'm just updating what I need to change. It saves time, and it avoids the mistake of copying and pasting mistakes. So now I'm changing the size of all the professional data points to size 10. And then we repeat this process for changing the color. So now white collar is going to be red, and now professionals are going to be yellow. And so this time I use .glyph.fill_color to change that. So I'm not messing with the transparency or the fill_alpha, as you can see up here. I'm not messing with that. I'm leaving that the same. And so now we're just going to run this and you can see the difference for yourself. All right, so that's the new one. We still have our legend right here. All of the yellow dots are professionals. We still have our tooltip, as you can see right here. And for our white collars, they're the red dots now, and you can still see the tooltip values here. Now, this was the original that we created. Again, this is not necessarily wrong. It just might not meet your purposes. It didn't meet our purposes. And so with a little bit of manipulation of the options, we're able to make something that's a little bit easier to see. So why don't we review what we've learned and conclude this video? So in this particular video, we learned how you are able to manipulate the glyphs on your scatter plot when using Bokeh. And so we started by loading our libraries. We set up our data, very little data preparation in this example. We made a default scatter plot so you can just see how things look without manipulating anything. And that was this guy right here. Next, we just changed the color. We made it a little bit bigger. We changed the color to yellow and we added a little bit of transparency. That led to our scatter plot right here. After that, we dealt with multiple glyphs and we added a tooltip, this guy right here. And so now we were able to subset our data based on the job type, which was going to be in our example, either white collar, WC, or professional, PROF. And that led, I believe, to this plot right here. Again, it works. You know, we have our tooltip, as you can see. And then we made some modifications to make it a little bit more visually appealing using the idea of being able to update. So only changing whatever you want to change from your original plot that you set up. So that involves using this .glyph.size. I don't know if that's a method, but this is like the way to access that argument without having to put in all the code. And that led to this guy right here when we still have our tooltip, as you can see. So I want to thank you so much for listening and watching. My name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you so much again for watching, and you take care.